This episode of the Better To podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and Needom, author of the Better To Burnout series, which includes her latest releases of Fairy Tales and I Love You and Is Love Just Another High. Welcome to the Better To podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is longtime friend of the show, Amanda Keith. This is Amanda's either third or fourth appearance. And today we talk about death and dying, grief, and so much more, including ancestral trauma. So tune in. Hi, Amanda. How are you doing today?
Hey, how are you, Donna?
Good, good. It's been a little while since you've been on, and you've had some things happen, and you do
hmm
have your shop. You have the brick and mortar shop, but it's not the same, and
It's not this.
that's still in flux, is it not?
It is. We're online. We're solid online, and then our shop space, it's smaller. So everything is being adaptable right now. Um, and we're preparing for something bigger. Like that's my goal.
Well, and I think honestly that should be the theme of the year is adaptable
Yeah, absolutely.
because we
Especially
know.
with it.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, especially with it being the year of the snake. I mean, it's all about resilience and shedding and growth and creativity. So, I mean, this is definitely the year to do it.
And then we have all the generational planets like Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, all moving, which is not normal. Normally, if they shift, but now they're all moving. So it's like what was there, especially Pluto, cannot stay the same.
Yeah, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of upheaval. And it started last year and it's leading in.
And so, I mean, when I look at my life, I mean, you're my friend, so you know this. When I look at my life, I know there's been upheaval because starting last summer, I started that move. And here
Yeah.
we are, I've moved, but yes, there's still more upheaval, and we'll get to that in a while. But even for you, I mean, the dynamics with your dad, because that's one of the things we wanted to talk about was, you know,
Yeah.
last summer you started with taking care of your dad, did you not?
I did. I was his caregiver starting in April. He moved in and then he moved out for a couple weeks and he fell. And I didn't know what caused the fall. Like there was multiple things because I don't know if we've talked about it, but I think we did privately, but about a year before, um, I had a dream of my stepmother like going, he has to get his stuff in order. He's had a heart attack and they were warning me. And I had told him and I had through that year working with the ancestors or what I call the beloved dead, allowing them to guide him to let me help him because my dad is a very proud, strong Marine and he did not want the help and it was really hard.
And that's something that, I mean, uh, speaking of my own situation, that is what I found myself to. My best friend has told me many a times recently, you need to let other people help you. And when and I know you're a strong woman and I know you have a partner and everything, but there's still when you're raised a certain way. And I think, I mean, I don't know about you, but my mother would constantly, if I didn't do something just the way she wanted it, well, I'll just do it myself. I don't know why I
Yeah.
asked you. So you become this person where it's like you just take on everything because so for you being a caregiver, and the thing is, people, for me, when I was a caregiver, I had the luxury, I had no other children. When my mom died, now I was a caregiver, I had two kids, and so that was a different role. But being a caregiver with children, as well as an adult parent, that's a lot of work. Plus maintaining your own business and everything. So how did you manage this? And, because I mean, I'm sure there's other people going through this at this time.
Well, honestly, the people that, you know, work for us helped a lot because really I had to pull away. I was mainly at home. I was with him. Because after he fell and he moved in, literally that day that we moved him in, he had defecated himself and it was black.
Oh.
And so I had just gotten his insurance set up with the VA because he was a Marine. He had not set that up. And he was in the hospital for 8 days. And there were some really close calls. And honestly, I knew he was heading towards the end of his life, but he was trying to fight and he was trying to extend as much as possible. Um, and so with him staying here, it allowed us to heal a lot because, little backstory, my father was an alcoholic. So my parents divorced when I was 5. And quite literally, I didn't see my dad for a year. And our relationship was good, but I would only see him every other weekend. And literally, once I hit 9, he didn't know how to handle me because when I hit 9, I had gotten my monthly. I became a young lady, and I couldn't be just that little buddy anymore in his world. He didn't know how to handle having a girl, and he didn't try. So from about 9, and then it really got bad after he got married. Um, he basically started a whole new family, and I didn't that like we would go over there, but it was like he would hide in his room with the TV, and if we wanted to see him, we would go in there. And he played favorites because I think he had a lot of guilt with my sister, because my mom was pregnant, had gotten pregnant, um, during the separation and divorce.
Hmm.
And in Indiana, the divorce couldn't be finalized until she had my sister.
Wow. Okay.
So speeding it up, I knew I would never have a true relationship with my dad until after my stepmother passed. She passed in 21, and he woke up. She had gone in her sleep peacefully. And I knew at that moment I needed to step up and be there for him. And from then on, but we were always at odds because he was very conservative and Christian, and which is oddly enough, and we can talk about it, you know,
Hmm.
he was my grandmother, his mom was indigenous. She's Apache and Cherokee. And so with my dad being so conservative, I looked at him, and as when he was living with me, I just looked at him like, you're not so as conservative as what you put yourself out to be. You're just not. And it was a healing moment. There was a lot of healing. And I was able to have the relationship with my father that I had always wanted, that I had when I was little. And that was, it was brief, but it was the biggest gift I could have asked for.
I think that is, I mean, there's certain similarities when you're speaking that I can relate to very much with my own father. But I think that's the one thing we don't look at when we look at family separating. We, especially back in the day. I mean, I think it's gotten better, and I applaud Bruce Willis and Demi Moore. That is
Yeah.
the quintessential of let's work together for our kids. And my dad at times, and I don't know if it was because my stepmother would invite my mom's mom after my mom had died for Christmas. When I was down for Christmas, he would invite her over. But what you're saying is, when my parents split, same thing. It was like it was very sporadic seeing him. It was very sporadic, and he swears up and down he never just didn't show. My mother would tell me he didn't show. Anyway, the whole product was me sitting out on the steps going, "Do I matter?"
Yeah.
And very much like you, my stepmother, we took a family trip to Disney. They pay, I was grown, and my half sister was grown. And she took her son. Her daughter didn't want to go, so her son went with his wife and kid, and then me and my sister and my dad and her. And
Mhm.
so we go, and my dad tells us, like, the second to last day, tomorrow I'm going to spend the whole day with you guys. okay, this is great. I haven't been to Disney with my dad since I was 8. So this is fantastic. The next morning, we're told at breakfast that he's spending the day with Cindy, and that's it. And so when we got back to the hotel to overcompensate, which is my dad 100%, there's all this Disney merch on on our beds. You know, like we're kids, like stuffed animals and whatnot. And I mean, it's cute and everything, but and so as time has progressed, my dad is just the only time when my stepmother passed, my dad did fall into the bottle. However, or should I say a case of beer, but however, during that time, even my half sister commented that we had him back. He was actually open with his emotions, open with his feelings. And then he met Kim, who he's been with for 20 years, and that's all shut down.
Yeah.
And in fact, now he's even more angry. And so I have, after my sister's death and a comment he made, and of course I was corrected this week by Kim saying that's not the case. Um, because when she died, he said very coldly to me, "Well, that closes that chapter." And when I'm talking to Kim about my situation, she's like, "Well, your daddy grieved," and I'm like, "But see, here's the thing. I don't know what is true. I don't know if she's putting rose-colored glasses on to keep the peace." So I know that what. So this week I was diagnosed with cancer, and you know this, and this is something on that I'm saying this. So I vacillated about whether I wanted to tell him or not. I had not talked to him since Christmas, and it was via text because he can't hear, and he didn't even respond back with a love you at Merry Christmas. He just told me Merry Christmas. I hope you have a great day, darling, and that was it. And I wrote back, love you, Dad. I hope you have a great Christmas too. Nothing back from him. Okay. So when I texted him yesterday, I was very clinical about the whole thing. I'm like, just thought you should know. I was diagnosed with cancer, and I won't know much more until next week. And that was it. And it took him about 30 minutes. And then he responded and he's like, wow, that's a lot. We haven't talked in a while. And I'm like, yes, it is. And no, we haven't. Because I mean, and I know this is your podcast. I mean, as far as, whoa, yes, the speaker thing fell or the boom mic. Um, the thing is, it's like he had this when I was growing up, I had this whole thing about who my dad was, about
Mm.
dad being this wonderful person, and dad was this, and dad would carry me to bed, which all that stopped after, kind of like you. I was 9 when they split, so that all changed, and it's like now when I took the rose-colored glasses off of who he really was, it's hard to, and especially when you voice your opinion. So while it would be nice for me to say, oh, well, this is going to change everything, we're going to get a relationship, I know damn well it's not. He's going to check, make sure I'm okay, I'm healed, and then it'll just drift away. I'm not going to have that happy story. And the funny thing is, digging into my astrology, it is right there in my freaking chart that our relationship is tenuous at best.
Yeah. But see, like I said, I wasn't expecting it. Like,
No,
if you would have told me, I would have had the closure that I did. But still, I left a lot of like unclosure because the scenario that I had with my father was my dad was an alcoholic. Okay. Um, he was drinking a lot more than what he was telling me. And I knew it, but he's a grown man. So at the time, I couldn't do anything other than just, okay, Dad. Well, if you need me, I'm here. And, you know, when he moved in, I put the law down. Like, I wouldn't let him smoke. I wouldn't let him, and especially after he went into the hospital,
yeah,
it was done. Like, nothing. And at this point, the process of him in the hospital. And what I was saying is before that, he quit talking to my youngest, my sister, who's 5 years younger than me. Um, she said it was stupid. It really wasn't anything. but it was a he said, she said. But my dad got so livid and he's like, I did not say this. I mean, he even said this to her. Like he got so livid. And I was like, Ashley, are you lying to me? First, she said she did. She said it, that she was lying. And then she said she just said that so I could have a relationship with my dad. I still don't know to this day who is telling me the truth and who's not. I mean, I've mended somewhat with my sister, but do I fully trust? No, no. Eh, And that's just because of past patterns and just what I've had to deal with. Um, and the thing is that with him, the hardest part watching him in the hospital, he was like, I'm gonna get up here and I'm gonna walk out of here. And I was like, okay. And he goes alive. And I go, we'll see. He had finally gotten what he wanted, which was a family and to have time with his grandkids. And it was it was gone within the time he had had it. I tried to get him to go to Alabama to go on a quick trip after he was seeming to get better. He kept telling me no. And I was like, come on, Dad, let's do it. Because me being a death doula, this is what,
Yeah.
you know, I'm prepared like to do these things. Like, okay, let's get you some closure. We made sure he had, his affidavit and I mean all of this. We made sure that, whatever he had, he didn't have much. He really didn't. And I just was like, okay. And we got everything together. I'm still dealing with his, what his leftovers. And it's just part of what it is. And but watching him going, this is a kick in the nuts. Like seriously, like he was having to grapple with he was finally getting what he want because most of his life he didn't feel like he was worthy. He was very beaten down, he was abused. And a lot of men just they don't, especially when they go through the military, they don't know how to accept like and express and they just stuff. And it's also the generation, you know.
Mhm.
And my dad, I had to fight with him tooth and nail. And I had to watch him extend his life. He extended his life to the point that literally after they took him off of dialysis and after they took him off his suppressors for his heart, he went within an hour.
Wow.
So, and I know he's around because the video is glitching.
Well, and I know what you're talking about with willpower because my grandmother, so when my mom died, my grandmother was like, "Oh, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die." Okay. And she would say this, of course, every year on the anniversary of my mom's death and the anniversary of my mom's birthday. So she would continue to say this, yet I was always single. I was never with somebody. So I get with my husband. We start dating and everything, and she was supposed to move up here. She didn't do it. Katrina happened. She moved up here, and my husband and I decide we're going to get married. And lo and behold, we got married in May, and she passed in August. And so I know that the whole reason she was continuing on was because she wanted to make sure I was taken care of. And the interesting thing when you're talking about dad, so my dad had a massive heart attack and stroke. And his injection fraction was apparently down to like 17%. They were like, he's not going to make it. The man's alive and well today, as we just talked about a little while ago. But, so I think if you really have that will to live, you can do it. I don't know that he's happy that he did. But when you were talking about your sister, because, mine's a half sister situation too. My dad went to my wedding. My dad did not go to her wedding. My dad did not go to my first wedding. But they were already at odds before her wedding.
Mhm.
But after that, I mean, so when my dad has the heart attack and stroke, he is estranged from my sister. She's estranged from all of us. So I call her and I'm like telling her whatever, and we start talking, and her mother reaches out to me. I haven't talked to her mother in like 20, 30 years. And her mother reaches out to me and she's like, Gretchen's got two kids. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Well, your dad doesn't know. And I'm just like, not my place to tell him. So
Yeah.
my sister died and her kids died, and my dad never knew until after. How sad is that? Because you want to be that disengaged.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
I mean,
go ahead.
no, no, no. Go.
I was just gonna say, I think that's the sad thing is when we try to disengage from stuff so much that we lose people, we lose things that matter. And that was the one thing my mom always got mad at him because his customers at the shop were always first. His family was second. And now I look around and go, your customers are not there anymore. You
Yeah.
could have had a relationship with your daughter, but one of the reasons I chose to move so far away is because I didn't want to be suffocated by him.
Yeah.
And not in a good way.
No, I mean, I have to agree with you on that. And I think a lot of men, especially men in older generations, um, they aren't taught to, prioritize their family or to, um, to speak up for what they want. They're just taught, I want to be a provider. That's all I need to do. I'll work. My dad worked. I
Hmm.
mean, he was a caregiver for my stepmother, and he would have to leave work to go take care of her because she would be at the house by herself. And, you know, and I knew my dad loved them. It wasn't the healthiest relationship, but I knew like they loved each other. And it wasn't for me to say. It just wasn't ideal because both of them had addiction issues. And I was just like, I'm removing it,
Hmm.
and I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my stepmother, and there were good qualities and there were not so good qualities. But um, with my father, he always chose her. And even my stepsister, I mean, literally, as he was in the hospital, I'm going through his lockbox. He's always had this box from the military, and it basically had his life in it. And I still have it. And there was nothing of me. He had a picture of my sister. He had a picture of Emily. He didn't have a picture of me for whatever reason. And I told Ashley, that's my sister, and she's my full-blooded sister. We have the same mom, same dad. Just sh- she never got to live in the chaotic mess that I did. Um, I told her, I go, at least he loved you. To me, I, there's still parts of me that's like, am I being used? Was I just used? Was I just the pawn? But I chose love and I chose peace. I have to think the best, even if he didn't have the best intention for me. And I think that's where I had the hardest part with the grieving is like, I never know. And then I would have, all my dad's guy friends, they were, oh, he loved you girls. And he was, you were just the light of his. I was like, you don't know the man that I know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was like, for years, I begged this man, and I have had to learn not to chase after men. Okay, because of this. I wanted my dad in my life. And it wasn't until I was in my power that my dad actually came into my life.
And in a way, maybe it's because you attracted that. I mean, that's the one thing we don't. I think I was in my 40s. I was in my mid 40s, and I was like, we had gone down to New Orleans to see him, and I'm like, I don't know if my dad loves me. And I mean, if you would ask me as a kid, I had no doubt. before the
Yeah.
divorce. Before the divorce. After that, I can't tell you how many times my mom would tell me, "Well, your dad loves you in his own way." What the hell does that even mean? Is there like a dictionary that says in his own way? Tell me, how does that mean? And I mean, I knew that if we went to the flea market, all I had to do was say, "Hey, Dad, can I have this?" But like you, when he would pick me up after a certain age, I'd go to my cousins and we'd go to the skating rink, and that was it. That was the visit.
Yeah.
And oh, where did I discover about sex? Oh, they had a copy of The Joy of Sex in the living room where the kid is sleeping on the sofa bed.
Does she love it? Um, yeah,
Um,
I mean, with my dad really did enjoy like before my stepmother, like he enjoyed our weekends. We like Friday was our pizza night. Wake up and have pizza, cold pizza for breakfast, you know. Who does that? Yeah, my
yeah,
dad. Um, you know, he would go and we would go grocery shopping, he would cook dinner. You know, we would listen to, you know, classical music or rock. Like he was the one that really turned me on to rock music. And you know, my dad used to play the guitar. He used to, and he was really good at it. And I looked at him, I was like, why didn't you take it with you? And he was just like, well, I didn't have an acoustic. And I go, why didn't you ask for it? And
yeah.
it was just like, and I saw the distance, like the patterns in my family. And like, I looked at my children's father and I was like, look, I, I'm trying to mend things and I'm trying to learn from my parents. I don't want my boys
Yeah.
having the same relationship and repeating patterns. So I really need you. And I mean, and it was a check-in. And it was hard on everybody. Like my kids to this day, even though my dad was here for just a few months, they really did enjoy him.
Hmm.
And I'm glad that they had that because I wanted that. I wanted them to know what my dad, because my dad wasn't a bad man. He was a good man. It was just he was caught up in his problems. And I think that's, and my dad was always unique. Like he was on that cusp of Aquarius and Pisces. So he was a really artistic, but also very, like he was super intelligent. Like some would probably say he was on the spectrum. Like he had that engineer mind. And he was a serviceman for Pepsi for 35 years. So, I mean, he loved what he did. He worked hard. And, you know, I started looking at the women he was, you know, my mom and my stepmother, and I saw patterns and I was like, this is part of the reason why he would get violent. I understood, you know,
Hmm.
because I started understanding my father on a deeper level. And I think that's the beauty if you allow the end of life to show you who that person really is and learn from them. And not to, because for so many, it's uncomfortable to talk about death. It's uncomfortable um, to talk about what does that look like instead of asking questions, bringing up topics to get closure. And like I said, the only thing I really didn't have closure with was did he really tell me the truth? Because I know for a fact he loved me. That was never an, a question. He didn't go about it necessarily the right way. But it's hard, and I'm going to say this, and people may agree with me, they may not. But if you don't love yourself and you weren't taught to love, it, it's hard to open up and to love.
Hmm. Well, and I want to go back to what you were talking about with your ancestors. I mean, the ancestral trauma, because
Mhm.
I started digging into my ancestral tree and I found out that my dad's mother, she lost her mother when she was 3 to the Spanish flu.
Mhm.
And apparently when her dad got remarried, She became Cinderella. He started a new family, and she was the little house girl to take care of everything. And so she was in an abusive situation. Then she got out of the house, married somebody. She came back because he was a drunkard. And she was pregnant. Her dad tried to throw her down the stairs so she'd lose the kid. She didn't. We have my aunt. But that being said, when my grandmother came up to live with me, I've always thought my husband, the first time he met her, was like, she's a pistol. Okay. So the first time I've always thought of my grandma, never saw her drink, never saw her smoke, nothing. We go get my grandmother's from Katrina, and she's in the back of the car telling my husband how she used to drink men under the table because she'd have a little casserole before she went to the bar. And she was smoking it. And I'm like, what? But then I take that and I look at my dad, who my dad I never really saw drink. The only time I really, except for a beer here and there, the only time I ever knew my dad really got drunk was when my mom's mom and dad got remarried, which I drove my grandmother nuts because I was the flower girl and I was running around telling everybody my grandparents were getting married. And she's like, we are married. Anyway, my dad drove the porcelain bus that night, but I never saw him really drink. And there's a reason to this. So as they divorce, my dad starts. His anti-drug speech was, I've tried everything, don't do it. That was his anti-drug speech to me when I'm like 21, and I'm like, really? We're doing this now? Um, but he would have these parties when I was in my, I would say about 12, 13. He would have these parties at his house, and there'd be people all over the place and just drinking. And before he started bringing me into this situation, we'd go see Star Wars. He would be kind of one-on-ones like your dad until we don't know what to do with you because now you're a girl. And I remember one time asking him, saying, Dad, can I spend some time alone with you? And he's like, what, don't like my friends? Well, being the people pleaser and the little girl, and you want your dad to love you, you're like, no, it's okay. And nothing changes. Even though you voiced your concern, nothing changes. And so as I go on with my dad, he's gone through a lot of things. And he was a fireman and he saved somebody. So he saw a lot of darkness, just like your dad being a Marine, the darkness is there. And he worked as a mechanic that was his side hustle. And he had his own shop for years, which became Don's social club besides the shop. So they're partying and carrying on, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But my point here is, so when Katrina happened, I had a dream right before Katrina about my dad driving off a cliff. Okay, now I understand when I look back at what it means. But right before Katrina happened, my husband got rushed to the hospital. And this kind of goes back to your stepmom in the ethers telling you, take care of him.
Mhm.
Because my stepmom tells me, well, make sure you have life insurance. Make sure you have life insurance. 3 days later, she would die in my dad's arms. And I know that messed with him because here he is saving other people and he can't save the woman he loves. So don't think I don't give him some credit. I understand he's gone through a lot and I try to give him grace. But I'm living and I'm still here and he doesn't really recognize that. And that's why it's just kind of like, I just let him be. But I think that's the one thing when we look at our parents, we have to stop and look at them differently than we did as a kid. They're not perfect. They have this trauma. He had a mother who obviously at one point was an alcoholic and
Yeah.
possibly his father too. So I understand that. And I made the conscious choice. I watched my sister at 15 drink Zimas. And I watched her at 2 years old at these parties. They were giving her booze. So she was already predisposed, and her mother was a functioning alcoholic until she wasn't functioning and got fired. So I've seen the damage this can cause, and you have to look at them and give them grace, but you also have to recognize that you are entitled, and I hate the word entitled, to feel your feelings. And I think that's where everybody's like, well, you're supposed to just give them a pass. Doesn't matter how I feel, but yes, it does. And I hate the statement of feelings aren't facts. Maybe not, but I feel them.
Yeah, and honestly, they are. Now, can you be ruled by them? Absolutely. Is it really healthy? No. Um, they matter. And they may not be like cold hard evidence, but the thing is I grew up, look, if it wasn't for my grandparents, they were my mom's mom and dad. They were like my core. In my core years, I had them. Okay. And I was grateful. And they were really my mom and dad figures growing up. My parents, for some reason, just did not like they didn't take ownership. And I mean, I talk to my mother every once in a while, but to be honest, I had to cut things off with her because, when she can look at me straight in the face and say, if I could go back and not have you, I wouldn't have you. I mean, how do you say that? How do you have that person? And I understand she's been through a lot. I know my grandfather had a drinking problem. My mama had her issues. But to say that, like, I could never tell my children that.
No.
Like, never. And I always tell my children they're my blessings because they are. I learned so much from them about me. I learned so much about them. And it's constantly, I'm growing. And I have no problem saying when I make a mistake, I'm sorry. I'm not perfect. And that's one thing my parents would never do. And that's the difference is I'm learning to go, no, I need to own mine and I need to respect them because my parents didn't respect me.
And I think that's the one thing that the younger generation is trying to do is get more respect. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of people that are very much sit down, shut up, and you're not supposed to, you're just supposed to be seen and not say anything. And unfortunately, right now, where we are in the world, it's not just about children. If you are not white male, you don't
Yeah.
matter. And I think it goes back to the family thing too, because all you want, especially being that kid, is you want to matter. You want that family. And when the people that you think are the ones that are supposed to be there for you and are
Mm.
not, it kind of just it makes you question your value the whole time. And if you, and I don't know about your mother, but my mom, if I used to occasionally look at myself in the mirror and just stare because I wanted to see what other people saw. And she's
Mhm.
like, if conceit were consumption, you'd be consumed. It's like, no, and it's like anytime I thought I was doing something right, it would like she'd have to take me down. And it's like,
Yes.
what benefits you by doing that? Because now you've made your child feel less than when you're supposed to be lifting them up. I mean, how did I don't know about you, but I had some friends that had like the quintessential perfect family.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there going, I picked this? Especially as an adult, when I look back, I'm like, I signed up for all this? Why
Mhm.
the hell would I have done that?
Yeah, I mean, you literally go, what the hell? What did I have to learn?
Hmm.
And the hardest part was like, I love my mama, and there was no denial. She loved us, and she was a great woman. But she was very much of that old fashioned of you had to look a certain way, you had to be a certain way, you dressed up to the nines. Like it was class. And another thing I don't know if we've talked about since when I've been on is that so I told you on my dad's side, there's indigenous. Well, when I was younger, I always gravitated to um to black. Black entertainers, like females, like those were the idols. Like they were strong, they were just outgoing, outspoken. I really liked them. They were intelligent, like all of it. And for some reason, I thought I was black. I even at 11 years old had this little boy that I called my boyfriend. He was mixed. I have always related. And at 11, hearing your grandmother going, if you don't break up with this child, you will be disowned. You're gonna disown me because I like somebody because of the color of their skin. I don't get it. So when I say I don't see color, I really don't see color. And it's not because I have privilege. I have privilege because my ancestry, because I also found out I have African American ancestors as well as more indigenous ancestors on my mother's side. So I used to say this as a kid, I was a mutt. I used to love dogs that were mixed because they had some of the best personalities and they were just so lovable. Unfortunately, it was a representation of me that I didn't realize. And I am mixed and I'm proud of all of my ancestry. And to this day, I'm like, my kids can date whoever the hell they want. I don't care. I am tired and this is going to end. I want, I believe love is love. I don't care.
Yeah.
Come from the heart, come from the soul. We're equal. There's no like, when one of the biggest things, I don't like snootiness at all. Okay. And I'm very laid back. And if you start treating me like I'm beneath you, you will start seeing a different person because it's like we're all the same.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I step up and I own all of my ancestors that couldn't speak up for themselves. I've lost so much culture and knowledge and stories because of shame and guilt and hiding. And I catch myself hiding a lot, especially since I've been grieving instead of coming out and talking and maybe I'll do more of this. I don't know. Um, I think it's important to talk about death because I mean, heck, we're in a death period now, like the life that we knew to the life that's now, and we're not really talking about it. We're just kind of like we're shell shocked. Some of us with so much going on, you know? And I'm like, these are deaths. These are shifts and deaths and it's not pretty, you know? And the biggest thing I think I could tell people is like, come from here, come from your heart. Treat people like you will always treat them and treat yourself the same. Be gentle with yourself. And that's something I've had to learn
I think that's one of the,
is
go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was
No,
gonna
go ahead.
say um I lost my train of thought. So
Sorry.
you're good. No, you're good.
I mean, I think that's, back to the racial thing. I understand that completely because when my grandfather passed, we all lived in a house. It was my grandmother, my mom, and me. And I was the only white girl in the neighborhood, and I had African American friends, and they were great, and we played ball, and we danced and everything. And when my grandpa died, my mom sent me to Florida to go visit my her best friend, which I called my Aunt Rosie, who was a hoot, and I loved her to death. And I would have stayed there. It was the best 6 weeks of my life. But I came back to a different house with no friends. So she would rather me have no friends than that. And then when we moved, and it's like as an adult, I really understand that what she was doing. As a
Mhm,
teenager, I didn't get it. But we had a high school in our neighborhood, and she's like, "You're not going to that high school." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" She's like, "No." She's like, "You have two choices. You're going to either go back to another Catholic girls' school, or you can go to this high school. I have an address for it."
mhm.
Okay. So I went to a high school and I had to lie to my friends about where I lived. It was like a big secret. If you got to come to my house, you had to be sworn to secrecy.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
because you were scared, like your grandmother, that I might end up dating a black man. Well,
Hmm. It's retarded. The shame and guilt that I'm still like, yeah.
well, it's not even, and it's not just about that. So when I left my husband, I gave him my car. And so my first husband. So I came back to get my car and I had a friend that was my best friend at the time, and we went out. My stepmother said, "Oh, I'm going to take you guys out to go drinking. Let your hair down since you're free now." I wasn't divorced completely. We were separated, and we had been separated for 6 months prior. But I had gone to get my car, went to New Orleans so my dad could look at it, and She takes us out. And there's one of my dad's friends who has liked me. He's not that much older than me. And he joins us with his friend. And we're all drinking. And yes, I am total blotto, total fucking blotto. And so, yeah, and I'm going to say this on camera, and I may have said it already, but if I haven't, oh well. So I end up, I mean, I mixed drinks, so I am like trashed. I am kissing the friend, and my hand is on the guy's crotch. And my stepmother feels the need to take pictures of all of this. So we go to, yes, they do exist. And so we go to this the next day. I mean, I don't sleep. I couldn't puke. That's how drunk I was. I could not puke. And you know that's not a good thing. So she takes us to Walmart. I end up puking in the Walmart parking lot. We get the pictures, and sure as shit, yes, there are pictures of us doing this. She shows them to my father. So fast forward, I moved back to New Orleans because I'm going to go to college and I'm 27. So it's not like I was a little kid. I'm 27. My dad's treating me like I'm 9. And I start talking to my friend about moving back up here. And my dad calls me a lesbian. He's like, you must be in love with her. You talk to her more than anything. So, and I'm thinking to myself, it's all because of these effing pictures that your wife took. And so now you think I'm a lesbian when I'm not.
Well, I'm sorry that happened because I can relate. Um, I had an instance where I was okay, when I was younger, I, I was so strong-willed and so just like I knew who I was.
Hmm.
I knew what I wanted. I wasn't tolerating anything. Um, I was very spicy. We'll put it that way. Um, and literally, I didn't need a man.
Hmm.
Okay, my mama was like, "You need to marry for money." Like, literally, she told me if she could, she wouldn't marry for love. She'd marry for money if she could do it all over again. And I looked at her like, "Are you kidding me?" Because you got a man right there that loves the hell out of you
Yeah.
and would do anything. Is he perfect? No, no. Literally, I had not been with a guy in a while, and I was with my best friend, and I was close, like I hugged my best friend. I would hold hands. Like with women, I think we need to show people it's okay to be intimate.
Hmm.
Like to hold hands, to hug. Like it's not, I want to do her. I support her. She is like a sister.
Yeah.
That's how women should be. And my mammal took that as, guess what? Because she was my roommate, because she went everywhere. We had one car.
Hmm.
She asked me, pulls me into the kitchen. Are you a lesbian? No, I quite like men. I
Hmm.
do. I love men. Um, no, this is the thing is like her motto and that toxicity of because she couldn't understand, she couldn't relate. She hated that I had big boobs. I inherited her breast and curves, and like literally, she'd come up, pull up my shirt, and I mean, oh yeah, in front of anybody, anybody. She's like, you want to cover those. And I'm like, I don't know how you're going to hide them. I mean, they're there. I can't.
It's
I
interesting.
can't.
Go ahead.
And it's just like I have been around these people that have wanted to change and adapt and move. And I was always that, no, like I am not. Like I have chose to live my life to me, period. And I think my dad said this. He goes, I don't have to worry about you. Your sister, on the other hand, I do. He goes, but I can't do anything about it.
And I think that's where the parents make mistakes is because they just think, oh, well, you're strong, so you got it made.
Hmm.
I'm speaking about the boob thing. I met a woman. So my grandmother and because part of the time I was raised by her,
Yeah.
one of the older ladies in the neighborhood. So she was like in her 70s. My grandma, I think, was in her 50s, and here I am, the teenager, and or late 40s. And my this lady says, make sure you wear a good bra. Make sure you do this. She says, my dad, no, wait, wait, wait. This is where the mortifying thing comes in. She's like, yeah, my dad and mom used to make me tie them down and bind them because they were dirty pillows. They were dirty. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, we have to look at how far we've come when we talk about that. And when you're talking about, I think there's this point in our life when we hit like 17 to maybe 21, 22, we think we have the world by the frickin' balls. I mean, I never have talked about this on a podcast, and I'm not going to say what band, but I mean, I literally went upstairs to somebody's hotel floor and I didn't knock on the door, and my friends caused a scene because this waiter got a pic and I saw it, and I told my friends to come see it, and they started going, "Oh my God, oh my God." And because they were in the elevator bay. And so the guy
Right.
disappears, and out comes this bodyguard wearing nothing but a freaking towel going, "What are you doing here?" It's like, oh, fuck. I'm like, nothing. We were just leaving because the guy who had the pick ran behind some maids. Little did I know later on that night, now I'm 17 years old. There's no way for me to do any of this. I'm not a guest at this hotel, but I'm sitting there in the lobby with my two friends. All the other fans are down in the thing, and the elevator doors open up with the band and the bodyguard. And the
Yeah.
bodyguard looks at me and goes, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm waiting for a friend." Really, really. Looking back as an adult, I'm like, are you that fucking stupid? He knows your face. Hi. He's like, well, you can't sit there. I'm like, well, I'm waiting on a friend. You can't sit there. Fine, I'm gonna go that way downstairs to the garage where they're planning on going, which I don't know this. He's like, you can't go that way. I'm like, why not? So I'm giving it as good as I can give it. I think this went on for about 5, 6 minutes before I finally acquiesced and went to where the other fans were. I was like, fine. And the band's laughing because I'm giving them shit. And my friends are just sitting there. But I'm like, as an adult, I look back and go, you're freaking crazy. You to even think you can get away with half that shit. But at 17, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this.
The courage that happened. I mean, I traveled most of the US,
Hmm.
like literally, like in my younger years when I
Yeah.
was younger. Did I really have the money? No, but I
No.
did it. And I mean, I used to call myself the traveling. I'm very gypsy, like when it comes to traveling. I love to travel. I love to, you know, uh, it was like if I could do it and I had the money, I would do it. Like it just, I didn't think about like saving and all that, even though I was told to. It's like, can you take it with you? Like seriously, can you take it with you? What's the point? If I get that age, great. If I don't, what am I gonna do? And it was it was always that kind of thinking. Um, I mean, I'm the one that went down to New Orleans on $400 to go see Jazz Fest. I mean, for
Uh,
the
when I
weekend.
when I left my husband, I left the car for him and the kids, and I moved up here with $50 in my pocket. So yeah, and then when you're younger, you don't think about those things because I could move cross country, not even think about it. It's like, okay, I could stuff in my car, I'll come back and get the rest, and it'll be fine.
Hmm.
However, this last move, it was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And you know that. You know that. But it's so as you get older, you just start freaking out because it's like, and you're like, where did that person that I was go? But then I don't think
Yeah,
we think, look at the road between that person and who you are now. Look at all that shit you've gone through.
exactly. And I'm like, for me, it's totally different. Like me now to me back then, it's so much easier. I don't care like what anybody says. When you have kids, it's not about you.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't be about you. Like it's about them, you know? And I mean, that's how it is. And I've always been a caregiver. So I mean, like I'm always taking care of somebody my whole life. I mean, I can't remember a time that I wasn't, whether it was, and I was always my dad's guardian. Like in his darkest times, I was always there for him. And so it just made sense, but with my mom, I looked at her, I was like, I'm not doing this for you. Like, I felt so bad.
I get it. I mean, you posed a valid question to me the other day when you were like, "Well, are you upset that your husband's not here anymore? Are you angry?" And it's like,
Mhm.
no, because while it would be nice for him to be here, and I wish he was, I'm not angry about it. I'm more angry about my mother not being here to take care of my grandmother because that's the hierarchy. And
Yes.
if she would have died of natural causes, sure, I would have been like, okay, then I understand. But her choosing and not to participate, that is where it's like, that's where the anger lies. And
Yeah,
you have to let it go.
you do. Because you can't make anybody change and you can't make anybody, you know,
The one valid thing, not valid, but I mean, you've talked about many valid things, but the one point you were just making about you can't take it with you. And I think that's part of the problem that we have going on in our society is you can't take it with you. That all these people are wanting to hoard things. And so, yeah, I moved house and I made sure I got things, and things are still scattered, and I'm not settled. But now with this diagnosis, it's kind of like, okay, now I have to look and go, while it's a routine surgery, as one of my friends put it, no surgery is routine. Anybody could die from anything on the operating table. You could get, and that's what happened. My stepmother had ankle surgery 3 weeks before, and then when they evacuated for Katrina, her foot was down and she got a pulmonary embolism and died because her foot had been down and not moving for like 8 hours. So this whole thing has made me look at, okay, I don't want to die, but what do I need in my life? How do I direct this? Who are the people that I'm going to, and what is my legacy? And it's not that you're creating this massive legacy, but I think the big thing here is I see that I do matter. And that's the hard thing. It's like, because so long, especially when you live alone, you come to a point where it's like, well, do I really matter? And I always know I do. I know I have people that care about me, but there's always that little spot that's in your head that's like, do I matter? Do I really? Kind of like you were saying about your dad. Do you know it's
yeah,
true? And those are those nagging thoughts that you have ingrained and learned from patterning from your parents.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's where you have to kind of like you're doing it great, like by reflecting. Like
Fine.
that's sorry, there's
You're,
Ace in the background.
you're fine.
Um, that's where you're learning and
Hmm.
you're seeing what is important and what isn't and moving in that. And I think, working through and I'd say young career as a death doula and on top of many other hats that I wear, the the deaths that I've had to do were the people that I loved the most so far. Um, and it was the hardest, but it was all worth it because I know they got what they wanted at the end. Everything was, and it was all very different. All deaths are different. I can say that truthfully. And like my mammal went very quick. Like she suffered a lot. She didn't find out she had cancer until 2 weeks before she died.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's how quick it can be. And she went rapidly. Like as soon as she found out that they mentioned cancer, she started giving up. Very next day, I got a phone call rushing to her. She was barely had a pulse. You could barely feel the pulse. You could barely, I mean, within a day. I mean, as soon as they said cancer, my mom and my sister had to undress her that night, the night before, the day that they took her to the appointment. Next day, I got an emergency call from my papal because she couldn't get up and they couldn't feel pulse, they couldn't do anything. And I was like, this isn't good. And when we were alone in the room, it was just me. My mom hadn't gotten there with my sister. My uncle wasn't there. It was just me and her. And she looked at me and she goes, Mady, they mentioned cancer. And she started crying. She goes, I can't do it. And I knew right then and there it was done. And I just said, okay, well, we'll try to find, to get you better. If and she's just like, Mandy, I can't. Like she didn't want to fight. And it was hard. But there were so many truths that came out. I mean, it was during this time that she decided to really be honest with me and was like, you're so much stronger than I ever could be. And this is somebody who I saw as strong, like one of the strongest women. And when she looked, and I was, what? And she goes, you've been through so much, and you're so much stronger than what I ever could be. And it's because I was willing to be me and I wasn't going to change. And I think, from the different deaths, there's different regrets. And you know, I think it's person to person. But the biggest thing is the after, like the estates and stuff and money and like that changes the whole family dynamics. Like
Oh
I've
yeah.
seen some ugly,
I watched that with
ugly.
John's family. So yeah.
And I was just like, luckily this time with my dad, it wasn't so bad, but there wasn't anything. And my dad just said, you're in charge.
Yeah.
And honestly, he cut everybody out but me. And that's kind of a bold statement to say, but I'm like, trust me, it's not, you know? And I'm like, people just don't realize, like, I have some books of his. I have his hats that he loved. I have his ashes, but there's not anything I would do to just, and I feel him every day, you know, ever since he's passed, like, I've never not felt him. But I miss the physical presence,
Oh yeah.
hearing his voice. And it's just those little things that you don't think about
Oh yeah.
until they are gone, you know?
I deliberately, because, and I mean, that's the thing. It's like for John, he was on borrowed time, and I knew that. And so when I got the iPad for him, because I asked him, I said, well, what do you want for Christmas? And he needed a new tablet. He's like, a tablet, but get what you want because I'm not going to be here. So I got him the tablet that I wanted, and I showed him the record button. And so he recorded one message for me. And yeah, it still breaks my heart if I listen to it, but it's there. So I can hear his voice. And I have every damn voicemail. It's funny because I needed a new phone and I was really scared about getting a new phone. But everything transferred over and I still have his voicemails, which I know some people would tell me that I'm still hanging on to him too much, but it's not that I really do. It's just there if I need it. I have some sweaters of his that yeah, if I need him to hug me,
Hmm.
it's about the closest you're going to get. But I know he's here, and the hardest thing is going through this without that person to crawl into bed with. You know, when he got the news about him, I heard it before he did. I made them tell him because they wanted me to tell him that he was going to die, that he was on borrowed time, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. But he had me there if he needed me. He had me there to hold him if he needed it. And yes, I have a friend that's very good to me. Um, but it's not the same. I'm not going to crawl into bed with them and just sit there and cry. And that's we talked about this the other day. It's like we because you were raised to be a strong woman. It's very much like the old man thing, though. I mean, the man thing. Although we do cry, it's like we cry a little bit and then we have to suck it up. And especially being single and the head of your household, you can't afford to break down. You can't afford to let it all go. Now, the other morning, yeah, I woke up and I'm like, worst case scenario, because I have other issues besides my heart and or besides cancer, which with my heart. And it's like, I don't want to die. I really don't want to die and all those things. And then the other thing is, and my therapist is like, actually, I'm doing the right thing. The other thing is I'm sitting there going, okay, so now what? Now I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to make sure that's in place, I have to do that. And I mean, it's all these things. And like yesterday, I went grocery shopping knowing that in 2.5 weeks, I'm going to have surgery most likely. So when I come home, everything's here and I will make meals. And so it's like playing with it's playing a dice game because part of me is like planning for the end of my life and the other part is planning for coming home from surgery. So it's a very weird thing. And yesterday when I talked to the nurse at the oncologist office, she's like, "Okay, so how is your mood? Is it, one being it's not really affecting me, 10 being I can't get out of bed?" I'm like, "It's between a 4 and a 7." There's days where it's okay, and there's days where it's like, So even though I put on a smiling face and even though everything seems okay, it's not always okay. And
Yeah.
I think we don't talk about, because I had to broach with my friend the conversation about, I need you to be my power of attorney. These are things that I have to assume. And some people I'm sure are going, "Well, what about your father?" My dad's not even going to come up here. But that being said, I had John and I was taking care of him and he had dialysis and everything. So my dad had his heart attack. I didn't go down there. So maybe I get what I get. But yeah. So I have friends that have to become family. And I think that's one thing we have to learn too, is that sometimes our family is not our family.
Yeah,
It becomes outside of us.
absolutely. I've always believed that, especially if you didn't have a good family dynamic, that you always end up finding a soul family because there's still things that you have to heal. There's still, you still need that support and you still need that love and nurturing. And yeah,
Well, I mean, like you and I. I mean, you're the 9-year-old who has the dad who is your buddy, and then all of a sudden is not your buddy, and then you have a sister, and you have a stepmom. And I mean, I can relate to all of that because I went through all of that as well, and the alcoholism, and while my dad was the happy drunk for the most part, my mom's dad, he was a nasty drunk. And in growing up in New Orleans, that's the one thing nobody really talks about is alcohol is everywhere. So
everywhere.
if you make it out where I did, I mean, I've been drunk maybe 10 times in my whole life, like really drunk. If that, I don't even think it's that many times. But if you make it out and can say that, that's pretty impressive because that's the thing to do. That's why I said it's Don's Garage and Social Club because at 5 o'clock, people come to pick up their cars and then bring booze.
Yeah. I never, like, I learned from my father and I watched, my papa and I watched, my dad's dad. And then even my stepfather, he was an army vet. He was actually in the Gulf War, had a Purple
Mhm.
Heart, everything. Like it was bad. He died, came back to life in the morgue, toe tag. Like there, we can make a whole nother episode on that one. But so there was always intense like PTSD and back then they didn't talk about PTSD.
Mm-mm.
I was like, I can't imagine what like I always saw the good in my stepdad, and then when he would do the abuse and everything else, I was like, you're a complete asshole. Like complete. And he got off on that. Like there were times I could see him being a slave driver, like a slave master. Like it was horrible. And at times, it was just him taking out his pain and his hurt on me or on myself. Well, it was really me or my mom. And this was family cycles. I could see it. And when I found out I had the African American ancestry, I was like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. And it was on her side. And the thing is my mom was like, no, it's on your dad's. And I'm like, no, it's yours. I was like, I'll accept it. I'll embrace it. And, you know, I learned not to drink. I learned not to do drugs. It wasn't to be that good girl. I just chose me.
Well,
I just chose to want better and to learn. It wasn't, I drank. but I ended up feeling like the more spiritual I got,
Right.
the more I felt like crap.
Hmm.
I did. And it was like, I can't do this.
No, I mean, for me, um, I've always been sensitive to medication, doctor prescribed over the counter, whatever. And yes, I've had cookies. I admit I've had cookies with special cookies instead of special brownies.
Yeah.
But the fact is, if I do it 2 days in a row, if I have a cookie one day and a cookie the next day, my mood is in the crapper. So, and like the last time I had a cookie, because you're supposed to all be happy and everything, it
Hmm.
made every one of my muscles tighten. It brought up more pain and everything else. And I'm just like, you know what? Not doing that again. Because it was supposed to help me relax, and it did the exact opposite. I'm like, But I think that's when you see people in your purview imbibing and drinking, and it leaves an impression on you. I mean, being a kid in a place where there's like 30, 40 adults all cracked out, or not cracked, but drunk out of their heads, you're not going to want to be part of that. You're not going to see it as the social thing. Even though yes, I grew up in the 80s. So as a teenager, and you're seeing movies that are touting the high school parties, and I wish I could have fit into that. I was never that popular, and in all honesty, I'm not sure all those parties ever really lived up to all that.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be part of that because you're never going to be drunk like that. You're never going to get drunk and stupid. Well, like get drunk and stupid at a bar, but that's beside the point. We already discussed that earlier. And going back to that, it's like I was not a lesbian, but because of that picture, the parent, and I'm sure my dad, when he finds out it's one of my friends that's taking care of me and that it's a girl, he's going to assume, and I just whatever, whatever,
Yeah.
because that's the way it is. Whatever.
And I mean, I've learned from a very young age, and I heard Mel Robbins say this recently, let them. And
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, because you can't control what anybody thinks of you
Mm-mm.
or what they do. And, I knew, like, growing up, my mama would always call me her little blonde hussy. Okay. I was far from a hussy, far from it. And, but the thing is I always owned who I was, what I liked, what I didn't want. I was very opinionated, and I could see why she called me a hussy because I was very much in my Lilith and still am. Have I toned it down? Yeah, I've toned it down. Should I? No, probably shouldn't. And that's me adjusting and analyzing. But, it did create like, why do you call me that? You
Yeah,
know? And it's like, no, that's not who I am. But I've learned to embrace it. It's like, fine, you want to call me a hussy? Here I am.
my grandmother used to call me a stripper, so that's about right up there with that. Like you're always
Yeah,
letting things hang out, and you're always trying. Oh, yeah.
it's like because I don't want to be covered head to toe, or I have an opinion and I want to be heard. And, it's kind of, and then I'm not perfect, I've always been loud and I've always been, like I said, opinionated. And I was like, and they're my kids sometimes, like my daughter is very quiet until you get to know her. And I'm like, what? Because I'm loud. And she goes, and part of it is also my raising. Like as a teenager, I had to fight. Like, and this is something like I've been analyzing. I really didn't have men in my life that were healthy, that were stable. I didn't have a provider. Like my dad always provided child support. God, I knew that. But,
Yeah.
and I saw that he always worked, but like he was never really there for me emotionally. I never had that male that was there to show me what a good relationship with a male looked like. And I had to figure that out on my own. And has not been the easiest struggle, but it's learning that I don't have to fight men, that I can respect them. And this world doesn't make it as a woman any easier. And I see the patterns of my ancestors as well, and bringing it back. So, yeah, you know, working and we're dealing with death and dealing with everything. It makes you have that introspection, and it makes you want to talk more and learn more and understand more.
I think one thing we all lose track of is we're all energy. And the one thing, especially in this country, is they set us up to divide. Everything is a division, whether it be sex, age, race, whatever. It's all about dividing you. And the thing is, if we all came together and actually put aside these petty things of I got mine, you got yours, fuck you, we would be more powerful than the crazy idiots that are in charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that goes
It's
around
all
the world, really.
it's been a classic game of dividing classes, dividing this, dividing that. We're all the same.
Hmm.
We are. And I mean that's been something that I've always believed in. We're not separate from this earth.
No.
What do you think these little things that, we carry with us and it's like an appendage to us, they're to distract us from what we're connected to,
Hmm.
whether it's people, whether it's earth, whether it's, Mama Earth is the best healer for us. Even just walking in her and being out in her and having that connection. And if we're meant to walk barefoot on this earth to connect with her so she can help us recenter, rebalance. Like that is so real. We're connected to the animals. I mean, it's amazing. So watching society as it is and all the divisions and separation, and I saw a huge shift in people, a huge shift in people after COVID,
Hmm.
like how they interact, how they don't interact anymore. Like they don't want to be around people. And it's like, well, yeah, most of the time I don't want to be around people. I'd rather be in nature or with animals, you know, but that's because I can feel everybody's
Right.
hurt or pain or disassociation. And like you feel it, you
Just
know?
yesterday, I was at the grocery store and this woman, clear out of the blue, just looks at me. She's all bundled up. It was like 50 degrees here yesterday, and she just stops in the middle of the aisle and looks at me. And yes, I was on a scooter because I was exhausted and hurting and everything. And she's like, "It's great to have wheels. God gave us wheels. That's a blessing, isn't it? Have a good nice day." And I'm just like, why do I always get weird people that just tell me shit? I mean, seriously, I've had more weird people walk up, tell me things, and I'll be like, okay. All right,
Mhm.
fine. And, speaking of nature, it's like whenever I see a feather, I usually take it as a sign that I'm on the right path. So I
Mhm.
get home, I unload. That's Charles. He's having a dream. Um, he's, I get home, I unload the car, I move the car around, I put it back, and I look over into a pile of leaves, and there's a feather sitting there on a pile of leaves. And I had already made my appointments and everything. And I'm like, okay, so I know I'm on the right track. And I think sometimes if you can find a symbol that will give you peace, you have to find that.
Yes.
Because right
Yeah.
now, there's no peace. And that's
I
the
wish
other
I,
thing. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
no, I just said, I wish I could hug you right now.
Thank you. I wish you too. But you're all the way there. But I was going to say the one thing, and this is what my therapist told me the other day. She's like, because we're talking about what's going on in the world, and when you're dealing with your own life, your own mortality, and you're trying to deal with all that, and you see all the crap that's going on, and you want to do something, but you can't do something, and it's like you don't have the bandwidth to focus on all this grief. It's kind of like I look back when John was dying, and it was right in the middle of COVID. So the months leading up to his death was all about COVID, and he was just wanting to watch the news all the time. And I would just be like, I'm going upstairs. I'm not going to deal with this because I don't have the bandwidth to deal with that and your death. And I didn't say that to him, but that was, and that's the same thing here. It's like I'm trying to think positive and get through this. And if I look at what's going on, part of me is going to be like, well, what's the point? Why are you trying? Because it's a shit show and you're not going to want to be here. But the truth of the matter is the shit show is not always going to last. I have faith that we're going to turn this shit around somehow. I don't know how, but I have faith that, maybe that, as my mom said, we named you Dawn because you were a new beginning. We're hopeful. Okay, whatever. But anyway, so I think that that's the one thing. And it's like when you're talking about your grandmother gave up. And when I look back, it was the other day after I had my little meltdown. And like during the move, when you were busting your ass moving, you had cancer then. You just didn't know it. So you have to understand that you can beat this. It's not a
Yeah.
death sentence. Even though you have some side issues that may be tricky, it's not a death sentence. But don't go in there going, well, everything will be fine and not take care of things. Just make sure you do all of the above.
What changes? What is this supposed to teach you? What is this supposed to guide you to? Because it's a whole new journey.
I think I'm supposed to learn how to take better care of myself and learn that other people, that I do matter, for one. Um, I have people that care about me. My best friend will sit there and say, well, no, you can't go anywhere because you have a wedding to perform and you have to be an aunt to my kids. So, no, you're not going anywhere. And it's nice that I have that support and that I matter. And I have to, as this girl who I was talking to yesterday was setting up an appointment and she was just like, oh, I'm so sorry, it's a mess. And I just sat there and I said to her, I said, it's no big deal. And I think that's really a huge part because I've always been stressed and always just so freaked out sometimes about things not going right. And it's like, I have to just roll with it. And I hate to say, maybe I understand why my husband near the end would always say, go with the flow. He never did. But all through the time I knew him, he's always like, you just got to go with the flow. And I think that's where I have to be right now because all I can do is take care of me and try to move forward. And I won't be able to unpack my house until later this year because it's going to be a recovery process. But I have to trust that things will happen the way they need to happen and that I'll make it out on the other side, you know? This most likely,
Absolutely.
as we're taping this most likely will be the last episode until I am back, and hopefully it'll be seamless. I mean, I did that with last year. I taped them all ahead of time. But, and the interesting thing or sad thing is at the same time, yesterday my sound guy lost his father. So, there's once again another death. And I think I don't know what my dad wants. I have no idea what my dad wants, and we've never had that conversation. He doesn't want to have that conversation. And the interesting thing is, my dad hasn't broached that with me. But then again, my dad doesn't even know where I live. So, except that I live in Chicago.
This might change things.
It might. As one of my cards said yesterday, while the words may match and while the sentiment is there and the feelings are there, remember the patterns and don't get trapped. Otherwise, you may get your heart broken.
Yeah,
So that's why it's kind of like I'm taking what he's willing to offer, but he's never going to be the man I need, and I'm just going to accept that, and that's okay.
I
It's
completely understand.
so we should wrap this up. We've been going for about an hour and a half, so yeah. So it's been fun, Amanda, as always. And maybe at the end, maybe for Halloween you can come back and we can talk fun witchy stuff instead of drama and all the other bits, you know.
That would be awesome. I would be
So.
honored.
So if you want, check Amanda's shop out at Three Crows Conjure. She's got some
Yes.
really cool stuff. Anything else you want
I-
to add?
there's future things to come. So we're going to be. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
And yeah, I look forward to Next time, if there is a next time, there will be.
There will be.
So,
All right. Thank you for coming.
all right.
So the podcast was kind of heady, and I had revealed on our anniversary episode that, yeah, I was diagnosed. This is being taped before that episode. I tape sometimes out of order. And when we deal with death, we don't necessarily, like Amanda said, we don't talk about the things of, we try to avoid it. We try to avoid dealing with things. But the honest to God's truth, which we don't really talk about, is getting our affairs in order. We think, oh, well, I got to get my affairs in order because I'm having this surgery. Okay, but shouldn't my affairs be in order anyway? Because, I could get in a car accident, or I could, you know, slip somehow, or I could do this, or somehow our life could be shortened. Um, and we don't think about those things. We think that tomorrow is always promised, but the truth of the matter is it's not. So we really should make peace with people. We should let people know our feelings, let them know how we care about them, how they fit into our lives and how important they are. And I think that's one thing I've learned during this whole journey, because the interesting thing is when I was getting one test done, I thought about my grandmother because my grandmother had similar cancer. And I was laying on the table as they were doing this test, and this is before I knew. And I thought about her, and I thought to myself, it's going to be cancer. And it was, but I wouldn't find that out for like another 2 weeks. And when I found out, my doctor had called me and they're like, do you have somebody with you? Is there somebody you can call? And I'm like, no to both right now because my friend's at work, and I texted some people, but there wasn't really anybody at that moment I could call. And it was one of those things where it was kind of like the universe is forcing you to sit there and be with it and reflect on it. And I think it took me like 2 days after I got the news. 2 days of, oh, it'll be fine, da 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 da, and I got to get this done and I got to get that done, and trying to make all these plans, but not really feeling it totally. Because, as Amanda and I were talking, it's like you allow yourself to cry, but then you can't cry because you're supposed to be strong and you're supposed to do this. And so I think it was like the third morning when I woke up, and this just happened, right? This happened this week. So this is all pretty new to me. Um, and for reference point, I'm taping this January 31st. So by the time this airs, I will be through the surgery and in recovery and everything. So by the time this airs, and I remember waking up that morning, and I don't know, something, I woke up that morning and it was just like doom, gloom, death. Everything's knocking at your door. It's in your face. And all you can think about is, I don't want to die. And I remember my husband being in the ER, and he had been told he was going to die at that point, and we were on the way home from the hospital, and he had a panic attack, full blown panic attack in the car, and they hadn't put him on oxygen. So we stop at an ER on the way there, on the way home, and they get him in. And I remember him looking at me at one point when he's in this major panic, and he's like, I don't want to leave you. I don't want to die. And those words just ripped at me so hard because it's like, that was the truth, because I knew he was on borrowed time and he did too. And I knew eventually that it would come to, he was going to die. He wasn't going to be with me. And while I started this whole trauma drama in my head about my own mortality and I didn't want to die, I have too many things to do. I have to look at my own mortality now. I mean, I'm not a teenager. I'm not in my 20s or 30s. And in fact, I'm closer to 60 than I am anything. But that doesn't mean it's a death sentence. It doesn't mean I can't fight. And I think that's the biggest thing that we miss because, as I said before, nothing is ever promised. Tomorrow's not promised. We could pass in our sleep, we could pass in a car accident. It doesn't have to be what I'm going through. It's just this kind of puts a magnifying glass on everything. It's like, hi, look at the spotlight. Here you are. What are you doing? How do you fix your life? And I think that's the big thing. And when I look back, as Amanda and I were talking, and we were talking off camera a little bit, when I went through my move this last year, I had some issues come up, and my friends are like, "You need to get to the doctor," and I'm like, "I will get to the doctor after I finish this move," because I knew if I went to the doctor during that move that I would, in my gut, I knew something was wrong, and that if I went, I would not be able to accomplish what I did. And my friend agreed, Amanda agreed with me. She said afterwards on camera, she's like, "Yeah, you barely made it through that move. It would have been 10 times worse, and I'm not sure you would have." So I think that that's something that we need to give ourselves grace with. And when she's talking about her grandmother, the day she got the diagnosis, the next day she gave up. And that's the one thing. It's like, I'm not going to say that I'm going to be back, but I hope to God I can. I hope that I'm blessed to be back and able to do this. And, there's a thought of, well, it's cancer, so you may lose your hair. Well, my hair is thinning anyways, so maybe I'll be doing the podcast with scarves on my head. If I am up to doing this, I'm going to, because it's still something, it's still part of me. And it's a gift. It's a gift to be able to do this. And it's a gift to be able to have listeners from around the world. And it means a lot. And so, if you can take anything from this episode, is look at the world we're in. And yes, it's chaos and crazy and it's fearful. But when a spotlight is held up to your own life during this madness, you have two options. You can sit there and say, well, you know what? I'm just going to give up. Not going to fight it. And it's funny because I kept drawing a fork in the road, the oracle card, for like weeks. So you have a choice to make. You can either just lay down and say, you know what, I'm just going to live my life and I'm not going to worry about it, or I'm going to take my health and try to get better. And I think that's the thing. It's like, I know that I want to live a life. I don't, yes, the world may be a shit show. It may be a total crap fest and it may get really tough. But I was given tools to do things and learn things and teach things. And so that is what I have to focus on, because truthfully, all the things that I have, I'm going to get rid of most of them because I don't need them. And as Amanda said, and as we all know, you can't take it with you, which always baffles my mind about where we are going. Why these people that are in charge think, I need money, I need this, I need tax cuts, and you need to cut all these other programs. Well, here's the thing, and I know, how am I turning political, but I am. Because the thing is, you're cutting healthcare, you're cutting food, you're cutting necessities for other people. So you can have your multi-million dollar mansion. So you can have all these things that you can't take with you, that you can't live at more than one home. I mean, two homes, fine, but if you have three or four homes, five homes, what are you doing? Do you need all that? Because eh, eh, people need food. They need a place to stay. They need a life. And we shouldn't be slaves to your your greed. And when I look at the big picture, it's like, if you can't take it with you, why are you doing all this? What does it have? What does it matter? Why can't we all get along, and why can't we all just take care of each other? Why can't we see, instead of letting them divide us, why can't we see that we're more alike than we realize? Sure, we may have different ideological views, but the truth is, if you look at everything with love, you're going to see the world differently. And maybe that person that has decided to terminate a pregnancy, maybe they have medical reasons, and maybe that's just because they're not equipped mentally or financially for that child. So would you rather a child be born into this world that may not get adopted? And adoptions, while it's a great answer, it's not always the perfect answer. But would you rather that child suffer and abuse, neglect? Would you rather them be tormented? I mean, can you imagine that child being told exactly what Amanda was told? I wish you had never been born. My mother said shit similar, but not exactly that. And that's damage. But we'd only want to look at this little group of cells that could be lost in a miscarriage, and how, and yes, where I live, they, not here in my state, but in this country, women have been prosecuted for having a miscarriage. So, so once again, death, life, dying. So today, look at your life, look at where you're at, look at what really is important to you, what really matters, and the stresses that are there. Everything changes. And the stresses that are there are not worth making your heart beat higher, your heart rate go higher. It's not worth any of that. Come with love and compassion. And I'm not saying be kumbaya, but maybe we need less hate and more love in the world. And maybe that would make life a much more beautiful thing. And on that note, I will step off my soapbox. I thank you guys for listening. As I said in the podcast with Amanda, this most likely will be my last episode for now. Hopefully not forever. But if the podcast goes away for a bit, check my socials to make sure that I'm still around. But I'll be back. And I appreciate all of you guys listening. And thanks for tuning in. And thanks, Rich Zai from 30 Year Audio, even though I'm not sure I'm going to let him edit this, but he has been a help. And honestly, the podcast wouldn't exist without Rich because he gave me the equipment to do it. And he believed in me. So I thank him. And I thank him because he got Fast Susie for the song. So um yeah. So on that note, thank you guys for listening. And whether it be morning, moon, or noon, or moon. No, you're not listening on the moon, I don't think, at least not yet. But whether it's morning, noon, or night, I appreciate it. I really do. And this isn't goodbye. As always, catch you next time, guys. Bye.